And they didn't have money.
And then they lost all the money because the banks take the money that you put into them and they invest it and they spend it to get more money back for themselves, and that's how banks grow and get more money. But since everybody took all the money away from the banks because of the stock crashing, then the banks couldn't invest. A lot of banks went bankrupt, and then people couldn't get the money out of the bank because the bank lost all its money. So a lot of people were left with no money and no life savings, and so the economy just went down.
So you get this one. So banks during this period of time, they're lending through the form of what? So they're lending money to people. And what gets invented in the 1920s? So who is underwriting credit cards? So people are charging more and more credit. The banks are lending money out for credit. The banks are also investing where? Coach Jim mentioned. What else are banks also investing in? They're investing in the stock market. So banks also lend money to homeowners, right? Their houses. Banks also have checkings and savings accounts. Banks are investing their money in stock. They're investing their money in credit cards. People aren't able to pay their credit card bills, and the banks have invested in the stock market. All these stocks lose value. People go to the bank to pull out money. So what kind of effects would that have on the economy? What's that going to do to employment? What's that going to do to hiring?
The stock market is. All I know is it's really complex way of sorting out problems.
And that has to do with the companies and their inventions, Apple comes out with a new iPhone and everybody buys it, Apple stocks are going to go up. Whoever comes up with a new iPhone, nobody buys their stocks, or they don't come up with any iPhone, their stocks are also go down, but that's all I know. I know people who make a fortune. There was a cat, somebody made an account of stocks for a cat, and over the course of 10 years, or however many years they had, the cat made more money than the professional stock trader.
And cars. If I change what I saved it to be something more eco-friendly, then I'm not gonna do it. Then the tax rate is lowered or it's taken away. You get it? If it benefits the U.S. government, they'll take away the tax limit. You get it? Yeah. There you go.
Okay, third question is in an ecosystem, everything is related. How are different parts of an economy related?
It's kind of like art.
Technological advancement.
No kind of making all art either on if there was a job opportunity to more
Trying to make technological advances and stuff and then they came up with the automobile and movie tickets were being sold. People started to go out more and do stuff instead of just sitting at home, I guess, and working all the time.
And then the fact that they created credit cards made it a lot easier to handle the money. And we had to demand on a lot of stuff.
which also affected standard of living since the mass production of stuff was being mass produced, found that stuff to be cheaper. So they try to produce as much of
Okay, what questions did your group have?
Just repeat that one. They didn't understand that part.
We're answering the loophole part.
Yeah, and then it goes into depth.
what are the positive effects of cutting income taxes and government spending in the economy? What are some of the negative effects?
Well, I mean, I think part of it has to be like people have more money to spend overall. My quality of life probably goes up.
Yeah, if I'm sure the upper class already has enough money to buy to be consumers. However, if the middle or middle class now has the capital to do so, they will. However, the cutting the taxes sounds like more communal stuff like education.
What's your question?
How would the government negatively affected if economy were cut?
It starts to like slow down, slows down.
Kind of like the more money there is, the more funding is quite the more they'll buy, the more they buy, the more money will flow. Anything else?
Yeah. And then it's just kind of like a cycle.
I don't remember how much the wage was for like industrial like factory workers, but I remember that CEOs like bosses, their wages or their earnings more than doubled in the same time as like so there's also more inequality.
That's the negative.
Makes it seem like you have a lot of money, but really
Yeah, like you can buy a new television. But, hey, I don't have this money, and it makes it very easy.
income tax and government spending in it. What are some of the negative stuff?
I guess there's more people. It's that as the kind of price system in America, the negative effects is that there's no regulations like the radio, and so then it's very easy for the economy to become like lopsided or people. Like, would they not be able to avoid those?
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Nothing at all.
I hear some really interesting conversations about economy of the 1920s. The other thing that I'm seeing a lot of, which is great, I see a lot of people writing questions down on the task cards as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through what we like to call a generative circle. We'll go table by table, and I prefer to actually have just people volunteer. Tell us one thing that you learned based on like the station that you did, and then one question that either you yourself have or that your table has about what you learned. Again, we'll go with the volunteer table. I'm not going to follow up. Yeah?
Station 2, now I'm just kind of like talking about people who are having more leisure time because we had more appliances and also like how they're spending more money into like entertainment and stuff. And one question I kind of had was, is more leisure time kind of representative of a better economy? All these workers have more spare time to spend money rather than the economy is doing well, or the opposite, or if it's even an indicator.
Okay. That's a really good question. It's like the fact that you see a lot of people with leisure time, is that actually a sign of a good economy, right? Because you have more people who are going to movies, right, than their work. The thing is, that could mean that people have time to go see movies, or that could mean that somebody doesn't have a job and they're going to the movies to kind of pass the time, right? So how do we know in the 1920s that it's probably more likely that people are going to see that movie because they can afford the time to be able to do it and the money? What's another indicator that you guys write about? Yeah, Bryce.
I would
Thank you,
say,
Stephen.
I would say because there are all these new labor-saving devices, which have just come out, which is a wonderful segue into mine. I did station number 3, which was all about the technological advancements. I learned that things such as the Band-Aid, the bread slicer, airplanes, radio all came out of the 1920s. And as well as things like mass production and advertising as well. So these new devices would save people time, and in some cases, because it's saving time, it would save money too. So people could afford to use these devices and then have more time to use things such as leisurely activities such as going to the movies. And I must say, it's not only the greatest thing since sliced bread, it was sliced bread.
It's true. Thank you, Mr. James, for yet another pun and or play on words. All right, let's hear from another table. This is great so far.
It's like an observation
Yeah.
that I had, that a lot of great inventions and a lot of labor-saving devices come from wars throughout history. Like World War I gave us like the toasters and the like airplanes and radio, but like World War II gave us like microwaves. A lot of different shoes and sunglasses were also invented in World War II. And I'm also thinking how a lot of these wars actually helped either at the beginning or the end of the war, during the middle, fix a lot of economies in a lot of countries. The economy of Germany at the beginning of like World War II, before World War II started, was like really, really bad with like inflation. But like as World War II began, their economy improved very rapidly to the point where this small country could keep up with the rest of Europe during warfare.
Yeah, that and it's Germany that's a really good example. The United States is another one. I mean, it goes from 25% unemployment to less than 3% unemployment in about 4 years during World War II, which is really, really significant. Okay, let's hear from another table that we have not heard from yet. Heard from this one and from this one. Who else?
We had a question about about like there's so many like technological advances what like who are they accessible to? Like could the lower class get like even a toaster or like a radio?
So let's think about. Could you guys? One of you guys answer that? Think about you have all these technological innovations. You got toasters, you got bread slicers, you've got gum, you've got all these different things. What's kind of for you guys, like, could people who did not have that much money afford these things, do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Well, yeah, because this time period like saw the rise in credit. So I feel like a lot of these people could buy these things on credit, but later on might not necessarily be able to pay the money back, and so then fall into debt.
Yeah, so credit cards are introduced during this period of time. You guys read about that, right? So if you can't afford to buy it that particular day or that particular week, what can you do? You put it on credit, you put it on plastic, right? What else is happening though during the 1920s that's going to make it so people can afford to buy more, aside from credit? What else happens during the 1920s where people can afford to buy more stuff? It's awesome. I'm seeing the same kind of people step up. I'd like to hear from some others. And this goes back, this isn't just from the documents, this is like in general. What increases during the 1920s that has to do with buying power? Okay, we'll table that question. Let's hear from another table just in terms of something that you learned and a question you've got. You've got 3 tables to go, folks.
And I guess one thing that we started we noticed once we started discussing was like the connection amongst a bunch of the stuff like the booming economy along with technological advancements. Like I guess with the booming economy, we noticed that there was like I don't know, say like there was a more job opportunities were being like opened up to, I guess, for more of the people, which kind of gives like reason to why technological advancements like came into play as more workforce, more labor would be accessible. Not accessible. Like,
well, what kind of jobs were these?
Mostly like industry jobs, like whether they were goods or there was also
manufacturing, right? Automobiles like that. So I know I was talking to this table a little bit earlier, Stephanie and Anna and Sebastian. I had asked that question to you guys, and your answer actually was really good. What drives demand in the 1920s economy? What creates demand in the 1920s economy?
Kind of if you want what others have mentality. If you have, for example, like if you have no car, like a new car coming out, you obviously don't want a new car because it's just like newer and it has more.
So how do you know about that new car if your neighbor doesn't have it? How do you find out about the new car based on what you learn? Noah?
Radio and ads. The national broadcasting. Search information.
Advertising industry. The advertising industry, as we understand it, is pretty much created in the 1920s, right? So it's like, what drives demand in this economy? It would certainly be what other people see. It's also marketing, right? So what's the other thing that drives this economy, aside from marketing and advertising? Jaime had said before that it was mostly manufacturing jobs, where you saw really significant job growth in the 1920s, right? So what's going to happen to wages in those jobs? They may go down, but they might go up or down, but you have more and more jobs over a period of time. Is that going to mean more consumption or less consumption?
More.
Probably more consumption. So here's the last question. In what way is an economy like an ecosystem? Hunter?
Well, I guess the economy is basically a cycle. So when you spend money, it goes in, like, say, the middle class is spending money, that money would kind of go up to the wealthy, and the wealthy would then spend that money to the poor who were working in their factories, and the poor would then spend the money on products, and it keeps going in a cycle. And a cycle, as people spend money, it keeps going back around, so people can make more and buy more.
Okay, that's a good general description. So let's think about the ecosystem, too. You have different groups, you have producers, consumers, like that. If one particular part of an ecosystem gets sick, what kind of effects are there on that ecosystem, on the rest of that ecosystem? If one part of an ecosystem starts to get sick, what happens to the rest of that ecosystem? At all. So how would that happen in an economy? Angela, you remember what we talked about? Or this table? We talked about a little bit about that whole relationship. All right, Kosha, you definitely shared that. Emma, do you remember that conversation? So yeah, how does that conversation relate to this idea of an ecosystem?
If, like, for example, if a bank can't, we're talking about if everybody starts taking their money out of the bank, then the bank no longer has money to support their investments, and therefore, like, that bank fails at giving money out of the loans or things, and like the whole system.
It could, right? Because if a bank can't lend money because, for example, people can't pay their credit cards, or the bank is invested in the stock market, the stocks have all gone south, then there's less money going into the economy. Banks can't lend money to businesses, which means that businesses can't hire as many workers, and then you have an overall effect on the economy. And that's really what I'm hoping that you got from this conversation, is that, you know, the different parts of an economy don't stand alone. They're actually interrelated with each other. And it's these relationships that are going to definitely make the 1920s economy really ramp up in the first part of it, but then it's going to lead to what we have, like the great crash of 1929 and the Great Depression. Okay? So, for right now, any of the documents that you've taken and actually worked with, you are free to keep as part of going on with the project. I would like you guys to go ahead and recycle the task cards at this time. And that is it for now, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your work today. This is the last weekend for coming in.